Story 1. I went through nursing school only to discover I cannot stand vomit. I can tolerate blood, feces, urine, biliary drainage, and pulmonary secretions. There is something about vomit I simply cannot tolerate. Story 2. I am a phlebotomist. I have never had anyone who could not stand the sight of blood, but I have had several people who could not tolerate collecting or handling other specimens received in the laboratory, such as urine, stool, sputum, and so on. Many people are surprised that most of our blood draws are from children, elderly patients, chemotherapy patients, and dialysis patients, all of which are notoriously difficult, and expect everything to be exactly like it was in school. I have had new staff tell me they will not attend Code Blue events because they cannot watch someone die. It is a hospital. People are seriously ill and sometimes die there. Story 3. I earned a prestigious degree in finance and economics and realized I sincerely dislike the kind of people who work in investment banking or finance. Not all of them, of course, but you know the person who thinks The Wolf of Wall Street is a documentary about him. Story 4. I teach English to children ages 3 to 9 in China. I cannot tell you how many people I have met while teaching abroad who either cannot stand children or constantly complain that the country is too different from their own. Being able to handle children and adapt to new surroundings are two of the most important requirements for the job. Story 5. I had a teacher at my nautical academy who was chronically seasick. Story 6. I work in a pathology and bacteriology laboratory. If you are at all squeamish, you have no chance. I took swabs from a piece of necrotic tissue on my second day, and I will never look at fried mushrooms the same way again. Story 7. Many people become lawyers only to discover they hate practicing law because they did not really understand what that meant when they went to law school. Law can be boring. It involves a lot of rote work that has little practical effect on a case and can be soul-sucking. Being a lawyer involves little grandstanding in the courtroom. Many lawyers never appear in court. Even trial lawyers, like those you see on television, get only a couple of trials a year at best, and some go years between trials. The only lawyers who are in court every day are criminal attorneys. Story 8. My brother-in-law went through seminary and took a job as a youth pastor, only to discover that he could not speak in public. Now he works in construction. Story 9. I am a sound engineer. I am sensitive to loud noises. I should have thought that one through. Story 10. I went to school to become a firefighter. A classmate dropped out because he was afraid of heights. Story 11. I have a master's degree in psychology. I don't like people. What a bunch of bastards. Story 12. I started my freelance business and realized I dislike people, flattering others, and worrying about clients paying on time. Story 13. I went to massage school with a girl who realized she didn't want to touch people for a living. Story 14. I went through human resources training and realized I could not lay someone off. Terminations for cause are difficult, but at least there was a reason. I am referring to downsizing. Story 15. Bartending has meant years of being hazed by coworkers and regulars, constantly being given the worst jobs in the bar, back pain from stocking very heavy items, and being the last one to leave almost every night. All that just to discover you do not like dealing with people, especially when they are drunk, or when you have to be sober, which I have seen a few times and it seems awful. Story 16. I spend a lot of time honing my voice and manner skills because I seem to have a talent for customer service. The only problem is that I discovered I hate people in general. Story 17. Going to school for veterinary nursing or veterinary medicine and then realizing you are scared of certain animals like mice or rats. You also have to separate the behavior of individual animals from assumptions about a whole species. Inevitably, you will be scratched, bitten, or injured by a stressed animal. I have several scars, but I separate those experiences from other animals of the same species. I have learned how to handle and read body language better, even for small animals like rats and mice. I am thrilled by all the responses. It is a challenging profession, and not everyone can go through euthanizing animals or causing temporary pain to heal them. So many people do not finish the degree. That is the same with many professions. Love you, Reddit. Story 18. Being a mover, we frequently went through new hires who cannot handle it. You would laugh at how many times we have walked into a house and the new guy asks if we have to move all of it, and I reply yes twice. or a customer asks to move one item again because they found a new spot, or there is a couch at the new place. To move. I see people become disheartened and annoyed. That's our job. You are here to move people's things until they no longer need you to do so. You are also paid by the hour, so please be quiet. Moving attracts some amazingly hardworking and kind people, and also bottom-of-the-barrel degenerates. Every day is interesting. Edit. Instead of commenting thank you 100 times, I just want to say it warms my heart to read the nice things you are saying about movers. I will read every reply. We do not usually have the best reputation, and it is refreshing to hear people appreciate us. So thank you all. Story 19. My friend applied to join the Royal Air Force. He failed the medical because he is colorblind. This was the first he had known about it. He was 21. Story 20. A friend trained to become a veterinary technician before realizing she was allergic to cats. She had grown up with only dogs. Story 21. I spent years learning about electricity and circuit design, only to discover I was colorblind and could not tell which wire was which. In college, I had nightmares about failing lab finals because of this condition. Story 22. I was determined to be a video game developer. I started in quality assurance and saw the endless hours of crunch. Developers working more than 80 hours per week without showers or shaving. The odor of many unwashed bodies. The crossed fingers hoping to meet. Publisher milestones for bonuses that might make it worthwhile. And the constant fear of not being picked up for the next project, which would threaten employment and mortgage payments. I decided to move into systems administration instead of development and never looked back. Story 23. I am a journalism major. I am antisocial and I live under a rock. Story 24. Going to film school and then working on a real set, learning the hierarchy and the unions and seeing the many moving parts in the politics can make you start to hate the industry and turn you off. Ask someone in film and television production how long they have been working in the industry. Most people's response is simply too long. Story 25. Has anyone mentioned a chef afraid of knives? I am one. Story 26. I got a job, only to realize that I can't stand getting out of bed every morning. Story 27. I went through a rather long apprenticeship learning how to cut meat, only to discover I could not stand the cold of the cutting room. I toughed it out long enough to be promoted to a manager so I could avoid working in the cutting room. Story 28. I own an in-home childcare. I hate germs, boogers, poop, and messes. Story 29. I work in an art museum. I love art and all of the community outreach the museum does, the programs for kids, veterans, and cancer patients to have a creative outlet. But I hate talking about art. So bullshit. Not every person who has an exhibit is a genius. Sometimes, rarely, but it does happen. The artist is a hack whose work required little or no creative thought, dedication of time, or new ideas. You look like an asshole if a patron asks what you think of the art and you don't shit your pants over it. You're expected to go to every gallery opening, which is basically every night, even though everyone forgets what was on display 2 weeks later. The number of times I've heard people say you haven't gone to the Bone Farm? You haven't seen JoJo's installation of cut-up pants? How many hipster galleries do I have to pretend to give a fuck about? Story 30. I hate the feeling of not being in control of an aircraft, and I get nervous when flying in jet aircraft as a passenger. I am also a pilot. Story 31. Going through rigor school to learn how to safely secure loads to a crane, only to refuse to work at heights. Earlier, going through basic and technical training and spending the first year at your first duty station, only to break down into a sobbing wreck at the prospect of your first deployment to the safest base in the region. Note: I want to stress that neither of these happened to me. Story 32. I took computer science classes to become a programmer. I did not have many problems with dyslexia until I had to take college-level math. After 3 years of failing algebra repeatedly, I felt it was becoming a waste of time and money. I had to abandon that dream. Story 33. I earned a master's degree in engineering, only to realize that I hate sitting at a desk all day. Story 34. I became an airline pilot and met my wife. I realized being away from home 25 or more days a month was not the life for me. I now have children and could not imagine being gone so much. I left the industry. It is a great job with experiences you simply will not have anywhere else. It does not even feel like a job. You never see your boss. I would not even have recognized him. You drive to the airport, board a jet, and fly to many airports in all sorts of weather. It is amazing. If I could do it 9 to 5, I would go back instantly. The travel did not bother me, even though I am not much of a tourist. But when you do have a life at home, like a wife or a close group of friends, it feels like your life is on pause 3 to 5 days a week while everything at home keeps going. Story 35. Aerospace engineers who do not want to make military tools. Story 36. I went through the Doctor of Philosophy process just to realize it is not at all like science classes in college. It is only harder. It is about doing original research, which college classes and most undergraduate research experiences do not accurately emulate or prepare you for. It turns out that the skill sets required to be a high-achieving science student and to be a research scientist have surprisingly little overlap. I should add that this realization came more as a professor than as a student. I am the child of a scientist and grew up in my father's lab, so I was introduced to research very early and took it for granted. Only when I began to teach and mentor research students did I see how much school trains students to be students, not scholars. This moment is not when one discovers a fatal flaw, but a decision point. It is when someone decides whether to switch gears and pursue research or to continue on the path they followed as students. The transition is often rough, but it is worth pushing through and the results can be wonderful. I am also getting many responses from stressed Doctor of Philosophy students, and I want to add one more thing for you. The Doctor of Philosophy process can be one huge mind-bender, and you may not realize it until you are on the other side. It can make you feel like your value as a person is being evaluated. This is not true. You can leave tomorrow and still be a valuable human being. Alternately, you can love your work and find meaning in it, and you do not need to lose yourself when you get criticism of that work. Criticism is good. It is how you improve your work, but it is not you as a person who is being critiqued. People will rarely go out of their way to make criticisms easier to take. This is part of the culture of academia, for better or worse. In the end, though, it is better to encourage an environment of open and honest discourse rather than focus too much on how doing so makes others uncomfortable. Remember, everyone is going through the same thing. Everyone finds it hard, and anyone who says otherwise is lying. Do not become isolated. Keep in touch with other students, particularly senior ones. Do not rely on your advisor as your sole source of support. Find other faculty members you jibe with. The more you put yourself out there, the more you will realize everyone is going through the same thing or has already been through it. Story 37. I work for a news feed. We had to dismiss an employee who appeared to have emotional difficulties writing Associated Press-style headlines. Story 38. I work for 911, and the hiring process to get on board is long and difficult. People go through hoops for several months only to find they cannot handle the stress of emergencies. I do not fault them. Most people have not had to deal with real emergency situations before. Story 39. I worked at a company that did residential new construction heating, ventilation, and air conditioning installation. One of our jobs was to send a team in when the house was still in the framing stage and install the furnace and ductwork. Most people hired by the company had completed a training program. For example, I completed a 9-month program with $10,000 in tuition. No one there lacked formal training. A new hire refused to help. We told him to climb into the attic and help another worker run some 16-inch flexible duct. He said he could not climb the ladder. We assured him he would be fine and even got him an 8-foot ladder so he could literally step off the top rung onto the trusses, but he would not go up. Finally, we coaxed him up the ladder after about 10 minutes, and he spent the entire time wrapped around a truss upright like a cat stuck in a tree. We gave up. The other man ran the duct himself, and we had to take 5 minutes to coax the new hire back down. We regularly had to lift 20-inch by 20-inch by 36-inch sheet metal collection boxes, which weigh a considerable amount, above 15-foot staircases. This man could not climb 8 feet onto a plywood floor and did not last long in the trade. Story 40. I am seeing an increasing number of people, usually over 40, who think they will simply learn to code and get a job within a relatively short period of time. Some succeed, but most do not. Story 41. Accounting begins mostly as memorizing a set of dry rules for how to treat numbers, figuring out how much to record where and diligently keeping track of them. After a few years, numbers are a relatively small part of the work. It becomes largely about people's skills such as communication, presentation, project management, sales, and so on. Soft skills are the majority of the work. There are many different kinds of work within accounting, but relatively few of them accommodate introverts. Story 42. When I get really angry enough to feel an adrenaline spike, I have trouble speaking. Every word is a legitimate physical and emotional struggle to produce, and it all comes out in a low, growling voice. I am a lawyer. Story 43. Graphic design. You design for clients, not for yourself. You do not get to have a lot of fun making goofy things you like. Some of you are lecturing me about the nature of graphic design. I know. I am a designer. I love my job and my colleagues. Even Sharon in accounting who has no taste. I have good days and bad days at work, just like everyone else. My comment is about those bright-eyed college graduates who cannot find work or lose interest because they realize that being a designer is a job. You are often at the will of your employer or client, and you cannot just make cool things anymore. Your job is to solve a problem and make sure it is on brand with whatever your client wants. It can be a hard pill to swallow for people who think graphic design is all fun and games. Can be. But in a professional setting, it is most likely not. Story 44. I went through a physics major and realized I do not want to work at a tech company. Story 45. I went through art school, landed a job as a three-dimensional artist, and realized that creating art for a company can drain your creativity like nothing else. Story 46. I love the idea of being a 1950s housewife, staying at home, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, and having a husband who worked until 5 and came home. Now the house is always spotless, and meal preparation is a science thanks to meticulous planning. So I have nothing to do. My husband comes home and goes straight to his computer, and anything I try to say is met with "I can't hear you" because of his headphones. I am not sure I can do this much longer. I am afraid of what will happen when I snap after being unable to talk to anyone over the age of 6 about my feelings. Story 47. I can't think of one for my field, web development, other than getting into the profession only to realize you hate a specific language or part of the development process. I know many people who do server-side work and are great with all kinds of programming languages but loathe working with cascading style sheets. Story 48. I went through 2 months of training for a call center job. On my first day answering phones, I realized that an anxiety disorder and a lot of phone calls are not compatible. Thankfully, this was not a career move but a stopgap, although it was awkward to resign. Hey guys, it turns out talking on the phone gives me panic attacks. You applied to work in a call center. Story 49. I earned a degree in computer science. I found coding extremely boring. I experimented with coding before my degree. I could do it at a small scale, and being good with computers in the mid-1990s was enough to get me into the field. I learned a lot about software engineering techniques and algorithmic approaches during my degree, but I do not enjoy the minutiae of getting a small segment of code to work, which was almost all I did during the first 6 months of my graduate job. It was frustrating not knowing what my small part of a program did in the wider context. I am now a system design engineer, sketching the high-level architecture, defining responsibilities, and determining how we demonstrate we delivered what the customer requested. I can still read code over the developer's shoulders, which helps. Story 50. I majored in mechanical engineering and wanted to live in a city. Oops. Story 51. I joined the army as an infantryman, but I avoid conflict whenever possible and am almost aggressively non-confrontational. I did okay during the 7.5 years I served. It became clear very quickly that it was not for me, but by that point I was already in and just went with it. Story 52. During all my part-time jobs through high school and college, I never accepted a managerial position because I knew I did not like being in charge of people and I did not want that kind of responsibility. Then I graduated from college, took a job as a project manager, and have hated it for the last 2 years. Story 53. Most YouTubers and other creatives I know who make a living from their work spent a lot of time in college studying something completely unrelated that they now rarely use. Story 54. How about the other direction? Early in college, I got a part-time job as a web developer. I told myself I would not be able to stand it if web development became my career. There is so much about it that I do not enjoy, but after 6 years of part-time development, every prospective employer wanted me to work in web development. My latest employer shifted me from web developer to an internet security role, and I never realized how much I love it. It is fascinating. Story 55. I teach writing in college because I really enjoy writing, even academic writing. Turns out I dislike reading student work, though, and that is most of the job. Edit. Here are examples of the strange things my students have written. Second edit. I am grading a new set of papers and will update this post with new oddball items as I find them. Story 56. In marine engineering, being afraid of heights, being claustrophobic, being afraid of the dark, being disgusted by decomposing sea creatures, being unable to handle 3 weeks of solitude, becoming severely seasick, or being afraid of water or the sea will prevent you from becoming a chief engineer on a vessel. Only the inability to handle solitude can be overlooked for very short work periods. I have had several classmates and have seen crew members leave for these reasons. Story 57. I earned a Doctor of Philosophy degree doing biomedical research. When I started my postdoctoral position, I was required to conduct animal studies that involved sacrificing rodents to harvest tissue. I could not do it and refused. Other investigators would laugh at my expense. Both my graduate and postdoctoral advisors said I would have to get over this animal rights attitude if I wanted to be a scientist in this field. But the joke is on them. I now run my own research laboratory that specializes in developing non-invasive biomedical research techniques to reduce the need for animal studies. The results are more consistent and more relevant to humans, which should increase the likelihood that drugs evaluated with these techniques will succeed in human trials. Story 58. I worked for the Big Four consulting firms for 12 years. As a soon-to-be college graduate, the idea of traveling to a client site every week sounds appealing. Once you realize that only a very small percentage of projects are located in interesting places and that United States domestic air travel is made much worse when you are flying more than twice per week, even with airline elite status, the appeal fades. Attrition rates are well over 20% simply because of the grind of constant travel. It is much more manageable if you are single or do not have children. Once you have a family, it becomes significantly more difficult. Story 59. It wasn't quite as bad as the original poster's example, but I majored in international relations for my bachelor's degree. I was interested in working in international development for an international nonprofit or conservation organization and using language skills. After I graduated, I had a bit of a crisis of faith about what I had studied and the career path I had expected, despite doing some internships in the field. I really didn't like living in Washington, D.C., which was where most of those jobs were. I also didn't feel I would be a good fit for government work, so I didn't pursue public sector opportunities. Without specific technical skills, I would most likely be doing administrative work all day, organizing projects in Excel or Word documents, managing events or travel schedules, and so on. Even for something appealing like global health or international election monitoring, the substance of administrative work becomes extremely boring and mind-numbing after a short while. Language-based jobs often wanted native speakers. Tasks such as translation or writing memos and translated reports can be just as tedious as working in one's native language. I also found that working for a nonprofit or non-governmental organization would mean making very little money in an expensive city and being unlikely to travel much, while working in consulting or the private sector in these industries would mean a poor work-life balance. Luckily, I had a statistics minor, which allowed me to transition to a quantitative public policy degree with an applied statistics focus. Now I work as a quantitative public health researcher, and I'm much happier. Story 60. I went to college to be a teaching golf professional, the person who works at your local course. Halfway through my time there, I realized I really hated working with other golfers. We are annoying and we all think we are special. So I quit that job and earned a political science degree. I now enjoy going to the golf course again, especially after dealing with local politicians all day. Story 61. Aircraft maintenance engineers may become unable to determine whether an aircraft or part is flight ready because they experience panic attacks. They may also become unwilling to sign off or accept that level of responsibility, because if they make a mistake, people could die and they could face imprisonment. Story 62. I went through the engineering process because people said I would be great at it since I played with Lego as a kid, only to learn I sit at a desk running tests all day and it is boring as all get out. Story 63. I'm a teacher. Much less blood, more vomiting, deadly flatulence, and booger eating than I could have predicted. Story 64. I sell beer, grow cannabis, and have been sober for 2 years. Story 65. Studying psychology with a mental illness is an ironic hellhole. On the one hand, you understand and empathize with people, and on the other, you overanalyze your own behavior too much. Story 66. I earned a degree in marketing. Later, I realized that I dislike consumerism. Story 67. I landed my dream job in information technology, only to discover most of my issues would involve printers and their networks. I hate printers. Story 68. I work in auto and home insurance sales. The workplace is strict. No rule bending, no giving in to customers, and everything must be meticulous. Clients are often treated with suspicion. That is not who I am. I am a creative person who loves to paint and play music. I always try to do my best to make people happy. I worked in customer service for many years, so I am still trying to break the customer is always right mentality. I trust people and can be a little naive at times. I sometimes break into tears if people yell at me over things that are not my fault. That happens in about 80% of my work phone calls. My mother worries that I am stressing myself into an early grave with this job. Story 69. I went to art school just to realize I couldn't stand not eating. Story 70. I work in higher education in admissions. I have second thoughts every time I realize a helicopter parent is posing as their adult child when applying to college, submitting information, or ordering transcripts. Story 71. I went to cosmetology school and realized I could not handle the cutthroat atmosphere. I just wanted to make people feel good. Story 72. I am a doctor. I have been a doctor for 1 year after 6 years of medical school. I still feel dizzy when I see incisions being made. I can assist in surgeries for hours, but only after the surgical field is fully exposed and no skin is visible. I suppose I will have to focus on non-surgical medicine. Story 73. Auditing health and safety in industrial food processing areas can be stressful. Slaughterhouse audits affect people. Story 74. Medical technologist. I worked in a reference laboratory for years and loved it. Great coworkers, hands-off management, and a family-friendly culture, but the pay was awful. Better money is available at hospitals. I took a hospital job and toughed it out for 1 year. I hated it. All that fast-paced work and multitasking in job descriptions translates to, they do not hire enough people but expect the same turnaround times, so you have to do everything simultaneously. I would rather take a pay cut and have a less stressful job. I recently interviewed at another, larger hospital and found they have fewer employees than my previous hospital. Now, Story 75. I was a mechanic. Turns out I am allergic to latex and coolant. German cars are known for their frequent cooling system overhauls. Story 76. I went to college for 3 years studying motor vehicle maintenance and repair, only to find it was the same material with minor variations. I left completely uninterested in fixing cars. Story 77. I went to music school only to realize I hate making coffee. Story 78. I have no idea how half of the people with Doctor of Philosophy degrees even obtain them, given how incompetent they are. Story 79. I'm a district manager for a very successful entertainment company. I'm absolutely exhausted. I hate scheduling staff and call-offs. I feel like I'm always at work, even when I'm not. I get calls from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. nearly every day. I have probably 50 missed calls and 70 unread text messages right now because I took yesterday off. I haven't even looked at my email yet today. It's non-stop. I recently worked 38 days in a row because I lost my bar manager and had to run the bar in several locations. This job is emotionally and physically exhausting. Story 80. I am a computer engineering major. I hate math. I would much rather be writing essays. However, the gratification of understanding the math and solving the problems correctly is just enough to keep me pushing forward. Story 81. I'm a meteorologist. 3 things, 2 of which happen in school that really weed people out. 1. Upper-level calculus will ruin many students. 2. Thermodynamics, which applies upper-level calculus, will also be very challenging. Both topics are near the end of the curriculum, so struggling there can make years of study feel wasted. 3. For operational forecasters, missing a weather event that causes deaths or major damage is devastating. Some people completely crumble. Others become emotionally detached. Meteorology seems to attract many socially awkward, highly focused individuals, and these people often do not handle failure well. Story 82. I knew someone who became a school therapist only to realize she disliked listening. She is a jeweler now, and hammering metal is more enjoyable for her than working with distressed students. Story 83. My dad went through the trouble of getting his commercial driver's license to become a truck driver because he loved driving, only to realize that he hated being on the road alone for so long. Luckily, he was able to find a job servicing buses, so getting his license was not a waste. Story 84. Computer programmer here. I had the moment when I realized I would be writing unit tests for everything I wrote. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.